The sun was warm on my back, a comforting weight as I trudged up the dusty path from the supply co-op. In my bag I carried the hard candies and sunflower seeds that were to be shared at my wedding. The thought brought a small, private smile to my lips. In a few short weeks Anya, would become Leo's wife. We had been promised to each other since we were children, a promise that had solidified into a deep, steady love, or so I had believed. I was nearly home when I saw him. Leo was striding toward our house, his posture rigid, his army uniform crisp even in the rural heat. But he wasn't alone. Walking slightly behind him with a delicate, hesitant step, was a woman I had never seen before. She was pretty in a fragile way, with large eyes and a brand new floral dress that seemed out of place among our practical cottons. "Anya," Leo said, his voice a low, serious rumble that immediately set my nerves on edge. He didn't wait for a greeting. "This is Clara. Is pregnant." The bag of wedding candy felt suddenly heavy, a sack of leaden promises. I stared at him, my mind refusing to stitch the words together. "I can't stand by and watch her carry a child and be condemned by everyone," he continued, his jaw set in that familiar stubborn line I had once found endearing. "I've decided to register the marriage with Clara first." The world seemed to tilt. The sounds of the village, the distant lowing of a cow, children shouting, faded into a dull roar. First. The word was a physical blow. Everyone knew we were to be married. The invitations were practically sent, the banquets planned. I forced my face into a mask of stillness, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly calm and slow. "I understand." Then I turned. I didn't walk home. I walked straight past our house, past the lane that led to the fields, and toward the old schoolhouse where the educated youth from the city were lodged. I was going to find Adrian. Leo had prepared a whole speech, I could tell. He had expected tears, arguments, pleas. My ready agreement had left him stunned. As I walked away, I heard Clara's voice, sweet and false as saccharine. "Leo, your fiancé seems very understanding. That puts my mind at ease." I didn't look back. Adrian was the son of intellectuals from the northern city. Sent down to our village due to a complicated family history, he was viewed by the locals as a handsome but useless ornament. He couldn't shoulder a heavy load like the village men, and his hands were better suited for holding books than a plow. But in that moment his difference was exactly what I needed. I found him mending a fence behind the schoolhouse, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as I approached, his clear, intelligent eyes widening in surprise. We had exchanged few words before this. "Adrian," I said, my voice still trembling with a suppressed storm, "will you marry me?" He sprang back as if I'd struck him, the hammer falling from his hand into the dust. A flush crept up his neck, staining his sharp cheekbones. "Anya, you must be joking," he stammered. "I mean it," I insisted, the words tumbling out. "Marry me and you won't have to slog in the fields to earn work points anymore. I'm strong. I can support you." He was so stunned he nearly choked on air, bursting into a fit of coughing. He looked at me, his gaze searching my face for a hint of mockery. After a long moment, his ears still burning red, his hands trembling slightly, he murmured, "You don't have to support me. I can earn money. I'll give you a good life." Then he glanced around at his drafty single-room dorm, at the one rickety chair he owned, and his flush deepened. "You said you'd marry me." My heart, which had been a frozen block in my chest, began to thaw. A flicker of genuine hope ignited. I had come to him out of spite, a desperate act to salvage my pride after Leo's shameless humiliation. I was fully prepared to be rejected. I never expected this quiet, serious man to look at me and see a future. He pressed his lips together, a little red-faced, and said, "Wait a few days. Let me prepare some things for the wedding. My parents, they worry. This will set their minds at ease." "My family has already prepared everything," I said, thinking of the quilts, basins and towels stored in my hope chest, all meant for a life with Leo. "They only need a groom." A small, gentle smile touched the corner of his mouth. "No," he said, his voice firming. "I have to prepare a special gift just for my bride." The next morning I went to the village head's house with the marriage application form. The old man, puffing on his pipe, barely glanced at it before stamping it and issuing the village certificate. "Tomorrow you can go with that boy Leo to register," he mumbled. I hesitated, the words stuck in my throat. It felt too monumental to explain, so I stayed silent, clutching the precious paper. As I walked out, I ran straight into Leo, leading Clara by the arm. His face screwed up in displeasure. "What did you come to see the village head about?" he snapped. "I'll tell you now. I'm going to marry Clara. Going to the village head won't help." I rolled my eyes, not wanting to argue, and tried to walk past, but he threw out an arm to block me. "Anya, you used to be rough, but you had a kind heart. Why are you making such a fuss now? Don't you have any sympathy?" Clara stepped forward, her face a mask of distress. "Leo, it's all my fault for breaking you and Anya apart. He has every right to be angry. Blame my miserable fate." She turned her wide, tear-filled eyes to me. "Why don't you just marry Comrade Leo and forget about me? Don't worry about me. I won't be here anymore." "You'll be my wife," Leo said to her, his voice softening. "I will take good care of you both." With a little sob, Clara threw herself into his arms, tears pouring down her face. Watching them cling to each other, my resentment solidified into cold, hard resolve. "Maybe your teammate is watching from heaven," I said, my voice icy. "Does he know you're caring for his wife and child like this?" Leo saw I remained unmoved, standing cold and indifferent, and a surge of anger rose in him. "Anya, I misjudged you. All those times Clara begged me to marry you were wasted. It turns out you can't even compare to her in the slightest. You're lacking in ideological awareness. You'd better go home and reflect honestly. If Clara's child is born and you improve your behavior, I might still marry you." I looked up at him, this man I had loved my entire life. "If you think so little of me and speak to me with such contempt, what right do I have to be your wife?" He straightened, radiating arrogant confidence. "Fine. At least you've got some self-awareness. Just behave, and when Clara's belly grows, come take good care of her and help her give birth. I'll consider marrying you sooner." I wanted to slap the marriage application in my pocket across his face. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. But thinking of Adrian, of the cautious hope in his eyes, I didn't want to cause trouble for him. So I merely shot Leo an annoyed look. "Leo, I mean it. I don't want you. Let our families call off the engagement. You marry your Clara. I'll marry whom I choose. From now on we'll leave each other alone. It's finished." I saw the first flicker of genuine panic in his eyes. He and I had known each other since childhood. Our marriage was a settled fact in everyone's mind. "If you don't marry me, who else will you marry?" he demanded, his voice tight. "Aren't you just angry because I'm registering with Clara first? Already told you. Wait until her child is born and I'll marry you. What's the rush?" Seeing his tension, Clara grabbed his arm and whispered in his ear, her voice just loud enough for me to catch. "Don't fall for it. He's saying this on purpose to make you back down. He likes you so much. He wouldn't marry another. He's only trying to manipulate you." Leo let out a sigh of relief, his expression turning sharp again. "Anya, I advise you not to play these games. Once I'm married to Clara, I'm done with you. Just wait for me 10 months. He didn't believe me. Not for a second. In his mind, he was the best prospect a country girl like me could ever hope for. I looked at him calmly. "Believe it or not, it's up to you. Just don't bother me about your business again." With that, I strode away, leaving him standing there, half embarrassed and half furious, shouting at my retreating back. "Anya, how long are you going to keep up this stubbornness? Don't blame me if I call the engagement off." His words were empty noise. I was already gone, my heart and my feet carrying me toward a different future, one I was determined to seize for myself. Holding the village-issued marriage certificate felt like holding a live coal. It wasn't for me and Leo, it was for me and Adrian. The name written beside mine was a declaration of war against the life I had always expected. I walked home, the dust kicking up around my ankles, each step feeling both terrifying and exhilarating. At home, the air was thick with the scent of steamed buns. My mother, a sturdy woman with hands worn from a lifetime of work, was kneading dough. She glanced up as I entered, her face softening into a smile. "Back from the village head? Good. The sooner you and Leo register, the better for peace of mind." I said nothing, my throat tight. I simply handed her the folded paper. She wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron and took it, her eyes scanning the top. Good. Your father can take it too," her words cut off. Her smile vanished. She brought the paper closer to her face, her eyes widening. "Anya, what is this?" My father, a man of few words but deep perception, looked up from where he was mending a fishing net by the window. What's wrong? This name. Mother stammered, thrusting the paper at him. When did that boy Leo change his name to Adrian? Father took the certificate, his brow furrowing as he read it. He looked from the paper to my face, his gaze searching. Daughter, he said, his voice low and steady. Explain. I took a deep breath, picking up a cornbread bun from the table and dipping it into the bowl of salty pickles, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. There's nothing to explain. I changed who I'm marrying. Your son-in-law will be Adrian. The silence that followed was broken by my mother's sharp intake of breath. Then chaos. You want to die, don't you? You silly girl. Are you rebelling against us? She shrieked, lunging across the room to pinch my ear with her iron grip. Such a good fiancé you throw away and you pick some pretty weakling. Can that face feed you? I dodged her, my own temper flaring. Yes. I like his face. Looking at him makes me able to eat 2 more bowls of rice. I'll kill you, you unfilial girl, she roared, grabbing for a rolling pin. The door swung open at that moment and Adrian stood there, frozen on the threshold. He had heard everything. A scarlet flush spread from his neck to his cheeks, but when he saw my mother advancing on me with the rolling pin, he moved without hesitation. He strode forward, his ears burning, and gently but firmly blocked her hand. Auntie, please, he said, his voice quiet but clear. Don't hit Anya. It'll hurt her. My mother panted with rage, but looking at Adrian's face, so handsome it was almost otherworldly, like an immortal from one of the old stories, she faltered. The rolling pin lowered an inch. I'll admit it, he really was that good-looking. Fine, she spat out, her voice still sharp but holding back. Then tell us what's going on. Father was calmer. He knew his daughter. I might be reckless, but I wouldn't shatter my own future without a reason. You, he said, nodding to Adrian. Wait outside a bit. I turned to Adrian, seeing the worry in his eyes. It's fine, I said, giving him a small, reassuring look. Don't leave him standing outside. Adrian, go sit in the next room and have some water, my mother muttered, her tone begrudging. Father gave us both a helpless look, clearly fed up with her sharp tongue but understanding her fury. Once Adrian was out of earshot, I told them everything. About Leo arriving with Clara. About his cold, unyielding decision to marry her first. About his demand that I endure it and wait, that I should even care for her during her pregnancy. I told them about his contempt, his belief that I was nothing without him. They exploded. My father, usually so placid, roared with a fury I had never seen. Outrageous. Is he even human to treat our daughter like this? I won't let him off. He made to storm out to confront Leo's family immediately. I stopped him. No. It's done. I won't marry Leo. I've decided to register with Adrian. But Anya, even if Leo's a scoundrel, you can't just marry anyone, my mother argued, though her anger was now mixed with a dawning heartbreak for me. Father nodded. She's right. We don't know this Adrian at all. What if his family are the same? What if he's just as worthless? Besides, he lowered his voice. He's in the next room. If you want to know something, just ask. Cornered, they called Adrian back in. The questioning began. Where was his family? What did they do? What were his intentions? Adrian stood straight, meeting my father's gaze without flinching. Uncle, Auntie, he began, his voice respectful. Then he did something that stunned us all. He reached into the inner pocket of his simple white shirt and pulled out a carefully folded handkerchief. He unwrapped it on the table. Inside was a thick wad of bills and nestled beside it, a gleaming gold necklace and a matching bracelet. They seemed to light up the dim room. My parents swallowed hard, utterly stunned. This was more wealth than many of our village families saw in a decade. Adrian, my mother finally managed, her voice hushed. With things like these, why would you choose Anya? It wasn't that they looked down on me. It was that with his means he could easily marry a city girl and find a way back to urban life. Why suffer here in the countryside with us? Adrian looked at me, his gaze soft and unwavering. Anya is wonderful, he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. No one compares to her. Being able to marry her means I am the one reaching up. As they say, a scholar's words can really soothe hearts. My father, who had been vehemently against it moments before, slowly nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes. My mother looked from the gold on the table to Adrian's honest face, and the fight went out of her. And just like that, my marriage to Adrian was settled. We agreed to register the day after tomorrow. Meanwhile, Leo had gone home restless, unable to calm down. He thought about coming to talk to me to reassert his control, but just as he stepped out, Clara clutched her belly, her face pale, and whimpered that she wasn't feeling well. Terrified, Leo scooped her up in his arms and carried her back inside. Neighbors who saw them so close together pointed and whispered. Clara seemed to feel no shame. In fact, she seemed pleased. Now everyone knew their relationship wasn't simple. Leo fussed over her nonstop, and by the time her pain subsided, the sky was dark. His plans to confront me were abandoned for the night. The next morning, Clara covered her face and cried in front of Leo, saying she couldn't go on living. It turned out that after seeing their intimacy, some nosy aunties had questioned her while she was washing clothes. When they learned she was his late teammate's widow, they had looked at her with open scorn. She was furious. "What do these country bumpkins know?" she seethed internally. "Once I marry Leo, they'll all be so jealous their eyes will pop out." Leo looked at her tears and decided on the spot. "We're going to register our marriage. Today." He wanted to cement his new path, to prove to himself and everyone else that he had made the right, honorable choice. "Claire, wait here for me. I'm going to buy a few things," he said before heading into town with her. That same morning, Adrian and I also went into town. We were the first to walk into the marriage registration office and complete our union. When I looked at the official certificate in my hand, the red stamp sealing my name to Adrian's, it still felt unreal, a beautiful, fragile dream. "Anya, what are you doing here?" Leo's voice was like a splash of cold water. Of all days, to run into them on this happiest of occasions was truly cursed fate. He stood there with Clara, his expression shifting from surprise to smug understanding. "Shameless," he barked, though a flicker of joy had sparked in his chest when he first saw me. He thought I had come after all, that my resolve had broken. "You actually followed me and Clara here? I know you want to marry me, but you need to understand Clara's belly can't wait. Be sensible. Once the baby is born, I'll marry you. And don't ever follow us again. If you scare Clara's child, even 10 lives wouldn't be enough to make up for it." With that, he slipped an arm around Clara's waist and gave me a look as if tossing scraps to a beggar. I stared at this foolish, self-important man and simply turned to leave. I had what I needed. I had my future in my hand. When Clara saw I didn't scream or fight, she curled her lip and said with false modesty, "Leo, maybe we should forget this. I can't compare to Anya. You grew up together. If she really gets angry and breaks the engagement, what will happen?" "She wouldn't dare," Leo said with disdain, loud enough for me to hear. "The whole village knows she belongs to me. Who else would want her? And besides, no one else here could compare with me." I stopped and turned my voice flat. "I already said it. Our families are breaking off the engagement. From now on, we'll have nothing to do with each other. Don't flatter yourself." I didn't bother wasting another word. I walked away, my hand finding Adrian's. His grip was warm and solid. Leo watched me go, an uneasy feeling creeping into his chest. He wanted to chase after me, but Clara clung tightly to his arm, holding him back. "Leo," she whispered, her eyes welling up again. "Are you regretting this? It's fine. If a pregnant woman like me is being pointed at and whispered about, I can bear it. Go chase Anya instead. You two can still register today." "How could I?" Leo said firmly, pulling her closer. "I promised my teammate I would take care of you and the baby. I won't let you suffer." And just like that, Clara held her fresh marriage certificate, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. Childhood sweetheart, engagement, none of it had mattered. Leo had still chosen her. But as I walked away with Adrian, my own certificate safely tucked away, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, I was the one who had won. At home, my mother looked at my marriage certificate, her emotions a turbulent river finally reaching the sea. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. "When you were born, you were no bigger than a kitten," she choked out, pulling me into a rare, fierce hug. "And now you're married. From now on, you can't be so reckless. Remember, you have to think of the family." My father's face was filled with a profound relief. Good. A wedding is a happy thing." He clapped Adrian on the shoulder. a gesture of acceptance that made my new husband stand a little taller. Let's tidy things up for our daughter. He decided the celebration would be held in 3 days. Since the cow shed where Adrian was staying was far too shabby and damp, the wedding room would be prepared in our house. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. The wedding candies I had bought for Leo were now for Adrian. The quilts and towels were brought out from my hope chest. There was a strange symmetry to it, using the trappings of one dead future to build a new one. Adrian, true to his word, had prepared his special gift. He had traded some of his city goods for fine red fabric, and the village tailor, working through the night, had created a beautiful, simple dress for me. It wasn't extravagant, but it was new and it was his. On the wedding day I put on the red dress. My mother, her earlier fury entirely replaced by a bustling, nervous energy, fussed with my hair, tucking a bright flower behind my ear. I had even allowed her to dab a little rouge on my cheeks. I was chatting with her in the main room, my heart fluttering like a hummingbird, when Adrian, looking unbearably handsome in a new dark blue tunic, leaned close. "I need to step out to bring you something," he murmured, his eyes sparkling with a secret. "I'll be back before the guests arrive." He had barely disappeared down the path when a noise erupted outside. Shouts, the sound of a scuffle. My mother and I exchanged a worried glance and went to the door. And there he was. Leo. He stood in the center of our courtyard, his face a thundercloud. The moment his eyes landed on me, dressed in my festive red, my hair adorned, a touch of color on my lips, his expression shifted. The anger faltered, replaced for a single, unguarded moment by a stark, undeniable longing. "Anya," he said, his voice rough. "You know, we only postponed our wedding." He gestured dismissively at my dress. "Hurry and change out of those clothes so Clara can wear them instead." Perfect timing. "Clara and I will borrow your courtyard today for our banquet. Sorry to trouble you." He then looked at the rouge on my cheeks, his brow furrowing with concern for her. "By the way, that rouge you used, it's safe for the body, right? You know she's pregnant, so we have to be careful." Clara stood behind him, one hand resting possessively on her still flat belly, a flash of pure pride in her eyes. She had won and she wanted to salt the earth of my defeat. I laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "Who said I'm marrying you? What are you doing barging into my house making a scene?" His face darkened, his brows knitting into a tight, furious line. "Anya, what are you doing? We're engaged. If you don't marry me, who else would you marry?" He let out an exasperated sigh as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Fine, I know you're upset. Just change your clothes. After Clara and I finish our banquet, we'll make it up to you later." The villagers who had begun to gather for my wedding couldn't stand it any longer. One of the older aunties, Mrs. Zhang, spoke up carefully. "Isn't today's groom supposed to be Adrian?" "Exactly," my father roared, finally breaking free of my mother's restraining hand. He had wanted to throw Leo out the moment he arrived. That single sentence from Mrs. Zhang hit Leo like thunder from a clear sky. His smug, confident expression froze, shattered into a mosaic of disbelief. He stared at me, his eyes wide. "What nonsense are you spouting? Anya would never marry that poor, city-bred youth." He turned his pleading, furious gaze back to me. "Anya, I know you're upset, but you can't joke about marriage." "I'm not joking," I said, my voice cool and steady though my hands were trembling. I locked my fingers together. "Today is my wedding day with Adrian. When you decided to marry Clara, there was nothing left between us." I made sure my eyes were cold without a single flicker of the old warmth. I wanted him to see only ice. Panic, raw and undisguised, spread across his face. "No, Anya. We're engaged. How could you marry someone else?" The logic of it was so twisted, so arrogant, it took my breath away. "You let me register with Clara, but you won't let yourself get married? Don't forget you're the one who betrayed me first." The sheer audacity was stunning. "You knew exactly what you were doing," I answered, my voice low and sharp. "If you wanted to play father to Clara's child, that's your business. But don't expect me to be the fool left behind." Seeing the finality in my eyes, a pain so profound it looked physical clenched in his chest. He had never imagined I could be so resolute, so completely beyond his reach. Gritting his teeth, unwilling to accept this new reality, he lunged forward. His hand, strong and calloused from years of training, seized my wrist in a bruising grip. "You're coming with me now," he barked, trying to pull me away from my own home, my own wedding. I can pretend none of this ever happened. We can still be together. A sharp, steady voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade. And where exactly are you trying to drag my wife? Adrian stood at the gateway, a brand new, gleaming bicycle propped beside him. He must have run all the way back. He didn't hesitate. He strode straight over, his movements fluid and sure. In one fierce, decisive motion he pried Leo's fingers from my wrist, pulling me safely behind him. Only then did I realize with a jolt that Adrian was half a head taller than Leo. Though leaner, his stance was unyielding, his bearing radiating a quiet authority that matched Leo's bluster entirely. The veins on Leo's forehead throbbed. Adrian, he snarled, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. How dare you steal my woman? Adrian arched a single, unimpressed brow. He reached into the inner pocket of his tunic, the same one that had held the gold, and pulled out our red marriage certificate. He held it up for everyone to see. Your woman, he said, his tone dangerously calm. Anya is my lawful wife. At most you're her ex-fiancé. Leo's eyes widened, scanning the names on the certificate. The last of his color drained from his face. Anya, he whispered, the sound ripped from him. You actually registered with him. The reality was finally, irrevocably crashing down. How dare you? Why not? I said from behind Adrian's protective shoulder. You could register with Clara, but I can't with Adrian? Leo sucked in a deep, shuddering breath, trying to rein in his spiraling rage. Anya, stop this nonsense. I know you're upset that I registered with Clara, but you can't just grab some man to spite me. His voice turned sharp, commanding. Before things get any worse, divorce him now. Then you and I can register right away. At those words, Clara's face went deathly pale. All her careful scheming teetered on the brink of collapse. She stepped forward slowly, her cheeks flushed not with shame, but with a new, calculated tactic. She looked at Adrian's clear, striking features, and her voice became soft, pleading. Comrade Adrian, she said, her eyes wide and innocent. How could you let Anya marry you out of spite? How can Leo keep his dignity if his comrades find out? He's always told me how deeply Anya loved him, how strong their bond was, and now she turns around and secretly marries someone else. How disappointed he must be. Her performance, her blatant attempt to manipulate the situation by appealing to some warped sense of male honor, struck a chord with Leo. Yes, he thought, his gaze softening as he looked at her. She is so considerate, so understanding. Unlike Anya, who doesn't care about my reputation at all. So willful. So reckless. Adrian, however, wasn't having any of it. He looked at Clara, his gaze piercing. Comrade, he said, his voice firm and clear, carrying across the silent courtyard. You're the one who registered with Leo, aren't you? What right do you have to call Anya a third party? She's my wife. You are the one standing in her home on her wedding day. His words, stripping away her false modesty and exposing her hypocrisy, made Clara's face darken. She staggered back a few steps, her hand flying to her throat. It's my fault, she choked out, tears instantly welling. Blame me. My husband died too early and left me with a child in my belly. I should have gone with him instead of dragging Leo down. Enough. Leo snapped, his protective instincts flaring. Adrian, if you want to come at someone, come at me. What kind of man bullies a pregnant woman? He saw my cold indifference on one side and Clara's pitiful sobbing on the other, and it left him restless, confused, and angrier than ever. I'd had enough. Today is my and Adrian's wedding day, I announced, my voice ringing with an icy finality. If you came to congratulate us, sit down and have a drink. If you came to stir up trouble, you're not welcome. Get out. The spell was broken. The villagers who had been watching the drama with bated breath now began to mutter amongst themselves. Leo, what nonsense is this? One man called out. You already registered with someone else, so why come to Anya's house? Don't be so greedy, another added. You can't eat from one bowl while staring into another. You married another man's woman, yet you won't let her marry. What kind of logic is that? The murmurs of disapproval burned Leo's cheeks crimson. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. He was surrounded, outnumbered not by force, but by the simple, clear judgment of the community. Finally, all he could do was look at me, his eyes filled with a helpless, desperate pain. Anya, he said, his voice breaking. Believe me or not, my heart is only with you. If you come with me today, I can forgive everything between you and Adrian. Get out, I cut him off, the words leaving no room for argument. Frustrated, humiliated, and utterly defeated, Leo turned and roughly dragged a sobbing Clara away from my courtyard. My parents, heaving sighs of relief, turned back to their guests with forced but determined smiles. Adrian finally turned to me, his hand finding mine again. His touch was gentle now, his thumb stroking my knuckles where Leo's grip had left a red mark. His eyes, which had been so hard and fierce moments before, were now soft and shining. Anya, he murmured for my ears only. You look beautiful today. A genuine smile, the first truly easy one all day, touched my lips. And you, Comrade Adrian, I replied, my voice barely a whisper, were very brave today. He scratched the back of his head in that awkward, endearing way he had. Anyone who bullies you is no good. He glanced toward the gate where Leo had disappeared. No matter what he does, he has nothing to do with us now. He then presented his final surprise, the brand new bicycle. It was a symbol of a modern, hopeful future, a world away from the dusty paths and traditional burdens of the village. The whole village looked on in open envy, especially the young women who had once secretly admired his handsome face but never dared to approach him. Now they nearly smacked their thighs black and blue with regret. As the banquet finally began, the air filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking bowls. The shadow of Leo's disruption began to fade. I was Anya. I was Adrian's wife. And as I sat beside him, listening to him talk earnestly with my father, I felt the first solid stones of our new life together click into place. The noise of our wedding banquet faded into the warm night, leaving behind a contented silence in our new room. The single chair from Adrian's dorm now sat in the corner, a humble sentinel next to the sturdy furniture my parents had provided. Adrian was carefully folding his blue tunic, his movements precise. The bravado he had shown against Leo was gone, replaced by a quiet, almost shy intensity. You were remarkable today, he said, not looking at me. We were, I corrected softly. He finally turned, his gaze meeting mine. The air between us shifted, charged with the unspoken significance of the night. He crossed the room and took my hands. Anya, he began, his voice low. This marriage, it began unexpectedly. But I want you to know my commitment to you is not a matter of convenience. It is a choice. His words, so deliberate and sincere, unstitched the last of my defenses. The anger and pride that had armored me since Leo's betrayal melted away, leaving me exposed but not afraid. It is my choice too, Adrian. He leaned in, and his kiss was not the rushed, possessive claim I had sometimes known with Leo. It was a question, an invitation. My answer was to lean into him, to let my hands find their way to the nape of his neck, to get lost in the startling gentleness of it all. The wedding night was not a transaction or a duty. It was a discovery. A slow, sweet unraveling of two strangers who had, against all odds, chosen to become a single hopeful entity. The next morning, I awoke to the sight of Adrian already dressed, watching me with a look of such profound wonder that I felt my cheeks grow warm. He had bought the bicycle, he explained, not just as a gift but as a tool for our future. I plan to take you to town today. There are things we need. Before we left, my mother slipped 20 yuan into my hand, her eyes glistening. For you, she fussed. If you see a snack you like, buy it. A married woman should have her own money. The gesture was so tender, so different from her earlier fury, that my throat tightened. I wasn't the greedy girl she remembered, always saving treats for Leo. That version of me was gone. At the bustling town market, the air was thick with the scent of spices, roasting meat, and the sweet, intoxicating smell of steaming glutinous rice cakes. My stomach growled. Adrian smiled, a genuine, easy smile that lit up his whole face. Go look around, he said, nodding toward the stalls. I'll wait here for the cakes. They need a few more minutes. I wandered, feeling strangely light and free. I spotted a stall selling sesame flatbreads and was moving toward it when a hand, rough and familiar, closed like a vice around my left wrist. Anya, come with me. I looked up into Leo's face. He was a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform was rumpled, and he smelled of stale sweat. He hadn't slept. What are you doing here? Let go of me, I snapped, trying to pull my arm back, but his grip was iron. No, he growled, his voice raw. Anya, you are my wife. I won't allow you to be with him. The use of my name was a slip, a testament to his fractured state. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. When I wanted you to marry me, you chose another woman. Now that I am married, you call me your wife? Your logic is as broken as your honor, Leo. His face crumpled. You don't understand the pressure I was under. She was pregnant. My teammate's child. It was my duty. It was your choice. I repeated the words I had just said to Adrian, but here they were a weapon. And I have made mine. His eyes darted around the market, wild and desperate. He was about to say more, to cause a scene that would shame us both, when Adrian's calm voice cut through the tension. I believe you are harassing my wife. He stood a few feet away, holding a steaming, fragrant packet of rice cakes. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were like flint. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Leo's grip on my wrist tightened reflexively, then slackened as he registered the absolute cold certainty in Adrian's face. He was outmatched, not in strength but in resolve. This isn't over, Anya, Leo whispered, his voice thick with a toxic mix of love and loathing. He finally released me and stumbled back, disappearing into the crowd. Adrian was at my side in an instant, his hands gently examining the red mark on my wrist. I'm sorry, he murmured. I should not have let you wander alone. It's not your fault, I said, my voice shaking only slightly. He's unhinged. Adrian's jaw tightened. He will not touch you again. It was not a boast. It was a promise. We rode the new bicycle back to the village, the wind whipping through our hair. I clung to his waist, my cheek pressed against his back, drawing strength from his solidness. The confrontation had been frightening, but it had also cemented something. We were a team. Us against the chaos he had left behind. That same morning, in the small house Leo had secured for himself and Clara, a different kind of unraveling was occurring. Leo had returned from his humiliating failure at the market in a black rage. Clara was waiting for him, her face a careful mask of concern. Did you find her? Did you talk some sense into her? She asked, her voice sweetly modulated. Leo didn't answer. He just stared at her, at the way she stood, at her flat stomach. The seed of doubt planted during the cold, sleepless night began to sprout. Her pregnancy. The constant, convenient ailments that always seemed to surface when his attention wavered from her. The way she had manipulated him at every turn. Leo? What's wrong? Clara asked, a note of unease creeping into her voice. Your condition, he said slowly, his voice dangerously low. The doctor in town. What was his name? Clara's smile stiffened. Why does that matter now? We're married. That's all that matters. We are married because you told me you were carrying my friend's child, Leo said, taking a step toward her. A child that would be almost 3 months along now. Shouldn't there be a sign? Panic flashed in her eyes, quickly suppressed. Leo, what are you saying? The baby is fine. I'm just slight. The doctor said it's normal. Get up, he commanded, his voice like a whip crack. We're going to the clinic. Right now. No. The word was a shriek tearing from her. It was all the confirmation he needed. The mask shattered. Leo's face contorted with a fury so pure it was terrifying. He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist with the same force he had used on me. You lied to me. You used a fake pregnancy to trick me. It wasn't a trick. I loved you. I saw you with her, so sure of yourself, so sure she'd always wait, and I wanted you for myself. She screamed, all pretense of gentleness gone. You're the hypocrite. You thought Anya couldn't live without you, so you trampled her. You deserve to lose her. You deserve this. The sound of his palm cracking across her face echoed in the small room. Her head snapped to the side. For a moment, there was only the sound of her ragged breathing and his own labored pants. The two of them devolved into a bitter, brutal brawl of words and slaps, a toxic dance of mutual destruction. When it was over, Clara, her hair disheveled and a red mark blooming on her cheek, sneered at him. It's too late now, Leo. We're married. With papers. Even if you want to, you can't get rid of me. I'll never give up being a leader's wife. That honor is mine. Leo looked at her, this stranger he had bound himself to, and his fists clenched until the knuckles were white. He had traded a future of sunlight for a life in a cage of his own making, and the door was now locked from the inside. Back in our home, the world was quiet. The rice cakes Adrian had bought were sweet and delicious. We ate them at our small table, the morning's ugliness held at bay by the simple shared act. I want to study, I said suddenly, the thought forming fully for the first time. I don't just want to be a village wife who works the fields. You have an education. I want one too. Adrian looked at me, his expression not one of surprise, but of deep approval. I was hoping you would say that. He reached under our bed and pulled out a small, carefully preserved trunk. Inside were books. Not just a few but dozens. History, literature, mathematics, science. It was a treasure chest. My father sent them a few at a time, he explained. I can teach you. We can study together. And so we began. Our days took on a new rhythm. I would do my share of the chores, but in the afternoons and evenings, our small room became a classroom. Adrian was a patient, brilliant teacher. He didn't just give me answers, he taught me how to think, how to question. Under his guidance, the world, which had once been bounded by the village fields, began to expand, filled with the vast, thrilling landscapes of knowledge. My parents watched this transformation with bemused pride. My mother would sometimes shake her head, muttering about city ways, but she could not deny the new light in my eyes. Meanwhile, the sounds of strife from Leo and Clara's house became a regular feature of village gossip. My mother reported it to me one evening, her voice a mixture of pity and grim satisfaction. He has violent tendencies, that one, she said. That woman screams every day. Her face is always black and blue. The village head even went to advise them to divorce, said no life is worth living like that. But she refused. She says people are just jealous that she has a husband who was once a leader. I folded the lesson I was working on, my expression calm. The news stirred no pity in me, only a distant, cold clarity. If that's the fate they chose, let them, I said. If they think it's happiness, so be it. It's the marriage they schemed for. Why would they give it up so easily? Leo came looking for me a few more times, a haunted, desperate figure at the edge of our property. But each time my father or Adrian would turn him away. The last time Adrian confronted him directly, his voice low and hard. If you dare harass my wife again, he said, I will not hesitate to report you to your superiors. Your career, what's left of it, will be ash. Do you understand? It was a threat that struck at the very core of Leo's identity. The military was his life. He finally stopped coming. Their bitter entanglement was a storm contained within the walls of their own making. It no longer had the power to touch me. In my world, there were only books, the quiet scratch of a pencil on paper, and the steady, reassuring presence of the man who had chosen me, and whom I had chosen in return. Our foundation, laid in the rubble of my old life, was proving to be solid, and it was ours alone. The world within our four walls became my sanctuary and my university. Adrian's trunk of books was a portal to realms I had never dared imagine. He started me with literature, simple poems and short stories that painted emotions with words. Then came history, tales of empires and revolutions that made our village struggles feel both small and connected to a vast human tapestry. Mathematics was the hardest, a language of pure logic that frustrated and fascinated me in equal measure. He was a born teacher. He never mocked my village accent or my initial clumsiness with complex ideas. He would sit beside me at our small table, his shoulder brushing mine, and explain a philosophical concept or a geometric proof with infinite patience. His voice, usually so quiet, would grow animated, his eyes alight with the joy of sharing knowledge. In those moments I saw the man he was meant to be, not a displaced intellectual but a guide. You have a natural aptitude for this, Anya, he said one evening, looking over an essay I had written on the themes of a novel he'd given me. His praise was specific, thoughtful, and it filled me with a sense of accomplishment that outshone any work point I'd ever earned. My parents watched this transformation with a mixture of awe and confusion. My father would sometimes linger by the door, listening to Adrian explain a point of economics, his rough, weathered face thoughtful. My mother, though she still worried this was all impractical, could not argue with the new light in my eyes or the confident set of my shoulders. The girl who had been defined by her engagement to Leo was gone, replaced by a woman who was defining herself. Meanwhile, the sounds from Leo and Clara's house were a constant, grim counterpoint to our quiet scholarship. The arguments were no longer just shouted words. We could hear the smash of pottery, the thud of something heavy hitting a wall. The village gossip, which my mother reluctantly relayed, grew darker. "He hit her so hard she fell against the stove," she whispered one day, her face pale. Old man Lee from next door had to intervene. She was screaming that she'd report him, but then she didn't. She just told everyone to mind their own business. I tried to shut it out, to focus on my books, but it was like a poison seeping under the door. It was Claire who finally forced the poison into our lives. She came to our house one afternoon when Adrian was out helping my father repair a wall. She looked a decade older. One of her eyes was swollen and purpled, and she held her arm at an awkward angle. The delicate beauty she'd once wielded was gone, eroded by bitterness and violence. "You," she spat, her voice raw as she stood at our threshold. "This is all your fault." I stood my ground, a history text still in my hand. "No, Claire. The choices you and Leo made are your own." "He can't stop talking about you," she shrieked, her composure shattering. "It's, Anya would have understood, or, Anya was never so weak. He compares me to you every day. You've ruined my life without even being in it." The sheer, twisted injustice of it took my breath away. "He ruined yours and you helped him ruin mine," I said coldly. "You built your marriage on a lie. Did you think the foundation would hold?" Her face crumpled, not into tears of remorse but of furious self-pity. "I loved him. I just wanted him. Was that so wrong?" "The way you went about it was," I said. "Now please leave. You are not welcome here." She didn't move. Her eyes, desperate and hateful, scanned our small, tidy home, landing on the stack of books, the notes in my handwriting. A sneer twisted her bruised lips. "Playing scholar's wife? Don't make me laugh. You'll always be a country bumpkin. He'll leave you. He'll go back to the city and leave you here in the dirt." Before I could reply, Adrian's voice came from behind her. He and my father had returned, tools in hand. "The only person who is unwelcome here is you," Adrian said, his voice like ice. He looked at her injuries without a flicker of pity. "If you have problems with your husband, take them to him. Do not bring your misery to my wife's door. Ever again." Clara shrank back from his authority, from the cold fire in his eyes. With a final venomous glare at me, she stumbled away. My father let out a long, weary sigh. "That woman is a snake, and that boy, that Leo, he's become a monster." Adrian came to me, his hand finding the small of my back, a steadying presence. "Are you all right?" I nodded, leaning into his touch. "I am. Because I'm here with you." The incident with Clara seemed to be the final crack that broke the dam. A week later, the news swept through the village. Leo had been formally reported for conduct unbecoming and domestic disturbance. The rumor was that Clara, in a final calculated act of revenge after a particularly brutal fight, had gone to his commanding officer herself, detailing his violence and revealing her own deception about the pregnancy. The fallout was swift and merciless. Leo, the promising deputy battalion commander, was stripped of his rank and expelled from the army in disgrace. The honor he had so carefully cultivated, the very thing he had believed justified his betrayal of me, was torn from him. He was just a man now, and a shamed one at that. We saw him once after the news became public. He was standing at the edge of the village well, his shoulders slumped, his uniform gone, replaced by the rough-spun clothes of any other villager. He looked hollowed out, a ghost of the arrogant, confident man he had been. He saw Adrian and me walking together, my arm linked through his, a book tucked under my other arm. Our eyes met across the distance. There was no anger left in his gaze, only a vast, empty regret. He had lost his career, his reputation, and was trapped in a hateful marriage. He had traded a future of shared growth and quiet happiness for a gilded cage that had turned to rust. He looked at the book in my hand, at the easy companionship between Adrian and me, and in that moment, I knew he understood the full, devastating cost of his choices. He turned and walked away, a broken man disappearing into the shadows of the village he had once sought to escape. Clara's dream of being a leader's wife had lasted less than a season. With Leo's rank gone, so was her reason for enduring the abuse. The gossip was that she demanded a divorce immediately, but Leo, in his bitterness, refused. Their entanglement was now a life sentence they would serve together, bound by resentment and shared ruin. That night, I sat with Adrian in our room, the silence between us comfortable and deep. The chapter of Leo and Claire was finally, definitively closed. Their drama had played out to its miserable conclusion, and we had remained untouched at its center, our own world growing stronger. The college entrance examinations have been announced, Adrian said quietly, breaking the silence. They are happening again after all these years. My heart skipped a beat. We had been preparing for this possibility, but hearing it was real was terrifying and thrilling. I want to try, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip firm. I know, he said. And you will. We will. He wasn't just supporting me, he was including himself. It was no longer just about teaching me. It was about building a future together beyond the dusty paths of this village. The chasm between the life I had escaped and the life I was building had become an ocean. And I was ready to sail. The announcement of the reinstated National College entrance examinations sent a shockwave through the country. But in our small village, it was nothing short of an earthquake. For the educated youth like Adrian, it was a lifeline, a chance to return to the world they had been torn from. For a village girl like me, it was a fantasy, a door to a universe so distant it might as well have been on the moon. But Adrian treated it not as a fantasy but as a mission. The very evening we heard the news, he laid out a rigorous plan. Our quiet scholarship transformed into intense, focused preparation. The small table in our room was perpetually covered in textbooks, practice exams, and sheets of paper filled with my increasingly confident handwriting. We rose before dawn. While the village was still shaking off sleep, I was already drilling mathematical formulas or memorizing historical timelines. Adrian was a demanding tutor. He pushed me harder than I had ever been pushed, his patience now tempered with a fierce urgency. Again, Anya, he would say when I stumbled over a complex chemical equation. Precision. The examiners will be looking for any reason to dismiss a village candidate. You must be flawless. The villagers watched our frenzy with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Whispers followed me to the well in the market. Anya thinks she's going to university? That city boy has filled her head with nonsense. My mother, though supportive, would often look at me with worried eyes, pressing extra eggs into my hand as if physical nourishment could fortify my mind against the impending disappointment. The only shadow from my past was the occasional distant sight of Leo. He had taken up drinking. We'd see him sometimes, slumped outside the village store, a hollowed-out shell of a man. He never approached us again. His disgrace was complete, and our success was a mirror that reflected his failure with unbearable clarity. Claire was rarely seen, a ghost in her own unhappy home. The day we received our admission tickets to take the exam in the provincial capital was one of heart-pounding terror and exhilaration. Holding that small piece of paper felt more significant than my marriage certificate. It was a ticket to a future I was actively seizing. The journey to the capital was my first time leaving the county. The world outside the train window was a blur of fields, factories, and sprawling cities that stole my breath. Adrian sat beside me, his calm presence a steadying anchor. He spent the journey quietly reviewing key points, his faith in me absolute. Remember, he said as the city skyline emerged in the distance. You know the material as well as anyone in that room. Your mind is your own. Trust it. The examination hall was a vast, echoing room in an old university building. It was filled with hundreds of candidates, their faces pale with concentration and fear. I saw city youths in smart clothes, their confidence a palpable force. For a moment my courage faltered. Who was I, a village wife, to think I could compete with them? I found my assigned desk, my hands trembling. I glanced over at Adrian, who was seated several rows away. He met my gaze and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. The proctor passed out the papers. The rustle was like the sound of 1,000 birds taking flight. I looked down at the first page, the characters swimming before my eyes. Panic clawed at my throat. Then I heard Adrian's voice in my head. Precision. Flawless. Trust your mind. I took a deep, shuddering breath, picked up my pen and began to write. The world narrowed to the space between my mind, my hand, and the paper. The essays on politics and literature flowed, shaped by countless evenings of discussion with Adrian. The mathematical problems, once my nemesis, unfolded with a clean, logical clarity. I was no longer Anya the village girl. I was a mind reasoning, analyzing, creating. It was the most terrifying and liberating feeling of my life. When the final bell rang, my hand was cramping and my mind was blissfully empty. I set down my pen and looked up. Adrian was already watching me, a question in his eyes. I gave him the same small nod he had given me. A slow, proud smile spread across his face. The journey home was quiet, both of us drained and lost in our own thoughts. There was nothing left to do but wait. The weeks that followed were an agony of suspended animation. Life in the village returned to its normal rhythm, but for Adrian and me, every day was a countdown. We tried to resume our old routines, but the anticipation was a physical weight. I found myself staring at the path the postman took, my heart leaping into my throat every time I saw his figure in the distance. Then one afternoon it happened. The postman, a man who usually just waved, was walking purposefully toward our house. In his hand were 2 official-looking letters. My legs felt like water. I couldn't move from the doorway. Adrian came to stand behind me, his hands on my shoulders, his grip tight. The postman smiled. For you both. From the university. With trembling fingers I took my letter. Adrian took his. We stood there, frozen, holding our futures in our hands. You first, he whispered. I broke the seal, my heart hammering against my ribs. I unfolded the crisp paper. My eyes scanned the formal characters, searching for the one word that mattered. Congratulate, accepted. A sob escaped me. I turned and buried my face in Adrian's chest, the letter clutched in my hand. I was crying and laughing at the same time. I did it, I choked out. Adrian, I did it. He held me tightly, his own body shaking with relief and joy. Then he opened his own letter. He read it, and a look of profound, quiet satisfaction settled on his face. He showed it to me. He had not only been accepted, he had been awarded a prestigious place in a top university, a testament to the intellect the village had never valued. We stood there, holding each other in the afternoon sun, 2 unlikely companions who had built a bridge of books and sheer wool from a village cottage to the halls of higher learning. The past was truly behind us. Our future, wide and bright and full of promise, had finally arrived. The news exploded through our village like a firecracker in a silent room. Anya, the daughter of peasants, and Adrian, the useless city boy, were both going to university. And not just any university, top schools in the northern city no less. My mother was the first to truly break. She had been cautiously optimistic, but when she held my acceptance letter, tracing the embossed characters with a work-roughened finger, she burst into tears of a kind I had never seen from her. They were tears of vindication, of a pride so fierce it hurt. My daughter, she kept saying, clutching me to her. A scholar. My daughter is a scholar. All her past fears about Adrian, about my recklessness, melted away in the face of that official stamp. My father, a man of few words, simply gripped Adrian's shoulder, his knuckles white. He looked from Adrian's acceptance letter to mine, and his eyes shone with a deep, quiet awe. You did this, he said to Adrian, his voice thick. You saw what was in her. I only helped her see it for herself, Adrian replied humbly, but my father just shook his head, the gratitude plain on his face. The reaction from the rest of the village was a study in contrasts. Many were genuinely happy, their earlier skepticism replaced by a kind of superstitious awe. We had become a local legend, a proof that miracles could happen. Mrs. Zhang, who had spoken up for us at the wedding, brought over a basket of eggs, her face wreathed in smiles. I always knew you were a clever girl, Anya, she said, though she had said no such thing. But envy, that old serpent, also raised its head. The whispers in the market were no longer about my foolishness, but about my unbelievable luck. She just married the right man, some muttered. He did all the work and she's just clinging to his coattails. The young women who had once regretted not courting Adrian now looked at me with a new, sharper resentment. I had not only gotten the handsome husband, but he had handed me a future they couldn't even dream of. We had little time to dwell on it. The weeks before our departure were a whirlwind of preparation. My mother and I sorted through my belongings. The wedding quilts were carefully folded to be stored. The practical, sturdy clothes of a village life were set aside. We took a trip to the town and with some of the money Adrian had saved, bought me 2 simple city-style tunics and trousers. They felt foreign and wonderful against my skin. Adrian spent days in long discussions with my father about the house, the land, their well-being while we were gone. He was not abandoning them, he was entrusting them to each other. He also wrote long letters to his family in the north, the tone of which, he told me, was one of triumphant relief. His parents, whose poor health had been exacerbated by long-term anxiety for their son, were finally going to see him not just safe, but thriving and married to a woman who was proving to be their equal. The day before we were to leave, I went for a final walk through the village. I passed the old schoolhouse, the big banyan tree where Leo and I had played as children. The memories were there, but they had lost their power to hurt. They were simply scenes from a book I had finished reading. It was then I saw him one last time. Leo was hauling water from the well, his movements sluggish. He saw me and stopped, the buckets hanging heavily from his shoulders. The bitterness in his eyes had been burned away, leaving only a dull, aching emptiness. He looked at the small bag of books I was carrying, at the new clothes, at the unmistakable aura of a person with a destination. There were no words. What could be said? He had chosen his path and I had fought for mine. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, not of friendship but of acknowledgement. A final admission that the girl he had known was gone. He hefted the buckets and walked away, back toward the small, unhappy house he shared with Clara. Their lifelong entanglement was their own to manage. It had nothing to do with me. Our last evening at home was quiet. My mother cooked all my favorite dishes, her eyes red-rimmed but smiling. My father presented Adrian with a fine hand-carved pipe. "For your studies," he said, a rare gruff joke that made us all laugh. We sat together, the four of us, and the air was filled not with sadness, but with a profound, hopeful anticipation. The next morning, the entire village seemed to be gathered to see us off. The brand-new bicycle, our symbol of a modern future, was loaded with our two small suitcases. They contained everything we owned, everything we were, and everything we hoped to be. My mother hugged me fiercely, whispering last-minute advice and blessings into my ear. My father shook Adrian's hand, then pulled him into a brief, hard embrace. "Take care of her," he murmured. "Always," Adrian vowed. Then we turned. Adrian mounted the bicycle and I climbed onto the seat behind him, holding onto his waist. As we began to pedal down the dusty path, I looked back one last time. I saw my parents, arms around each other, waving. I saw the villagers, their faces a mosaic of wonder, envy, and pride. I saw the familiar landscape of my childhood, the fields, the roofs, the well-worn paths. It was all receding, becoming smaller and smaller, a picture from a past life. I turned my face forward, pressing my cheek against Adrian's back, feeling the steady strength of him. The road ahead was long and unknown, leading to a vast, bustling city and a world of knowledge. But I was not afraid. I was Anya. I was a scholar. I was his wife. And I was finally, completely free. The city was a symphony of noise. A cacophony of bicycle bells, the rumble of rare automobiles, the constant hum of thousands of voices and the blare of loudspeakers. It was overwhelming, a sensory assault after the deep, breathing silences of the village. I clung to Adrian's arm as we navigated the bustling railway station, our two small suitcases feeling like pathetic anchors in this vast human ocean. He, however, seemed to transform. The quiet, cautious man from the village walked with a new purpose, his shoulders straight, his eyes alight with a familiar energy. This was his world, or a shadow of the world he had lost. He navigated the complex bus routes with ease, leading us to the gates of the university. The campus was another world entirely. It was a sanctuary of ancient, ivy-covered buildings and wide, tree-lined paths. Students hurried everywhere, their arms laden with books, their faces etched with a concentration I recognized from my own intense studies with Adrian. The air itself felt different, charged with intellect and ambition. Our arrival caused a minor stir. Adrian, the returned son of intellectuals, was welcomed by the faculty with a respectful warmth. But I was the object of open curiosity. A village wife, admitted on her own merit? The whispers were palpable. I saw the sidelong glances, the raised eyebrows. I felt the weight of their assumptions, that I was a charity case, a bumpkin who had lucked into a brilliant husband. Our dormitory room was small and stark, shared with another married couple. It was a far cry from the spaciousness of my parents' home, but it was ours. That first night, as we lay on our narrow cot, the unfamiliar sounds of the city drifting through the window, a wave of crushing loneliness and doubt washed over me. What was I doing here? I was an imposter, a peasant girl playing scholar. As if sensing my turmoil, Adrian's hand found mine in the dark. They don't know you, he whispered into the silence. They don't know the strength it took to get here. Show them. His words were a lifeline. The next morning I walked into my first lecture on modern literature with my head high. The professor, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes, called the roll. When she reached my name, Anya, she paused, her gaze sweeping over me, taking in my simple homemade tunic. The village prodigy, she said, her tone not unkind but deeply skeptical. Let us see if rural life has given you any unique insight into urban disillusionment in the post-revolutionary novel. A few students snickered. My face grew hot, but I met her gaze. I thought of the countless evenings with Adrian, debating themes and characters by the light of a single lamp. I thought of the essays I had written, the logic I had honed. When I spoke, my voice was clear, without a trace of the tremor I felt inside. I spoke not of abstract theory but of the human cost of change, of the tension between tradition and progress, a tension I had lived. I used the village as my lens, not as a limitation, but as a foundation for understanding a universal struggle. The room fell silent. The professor's skeptical expression softened into one of thoughtful interest. A compelling perspective, she conceded. One we would do well to consider. It was a small victory, but it was everything. The wall of prejudice had a crack in it. From that day on, I worked with a ferocious determination. I was always the first in the library and the last to leave. I asked questions, I challenged points, I devoured knowledge not as a privilege, but as a right I had earned with sweat and will. Adrian meanwhile flourished. He was in his element, his intellect finally given the space it needed. He was quickly recognized as one of the top students in his cohort. But the most beautiful thing was that our partnership only deepened. We were no longer just teacher and student, we were colleagues, peers. We would spend our evenings in a quiet corner of the library, sharing our notes, debating political philosophy, and helping each other through difficult problem sets. The village girl and the city intellectual had met in the middle, on the common ground of a shared passion. We received letters from home every few weeks. My mother's were filled with village gossip, always ending with how proud they were. My father's were shorter, but his clumsy characters carried a profound warmth. He once wrote, "The village talks of little else but you two. You have changed what they think is possible." There was never any news of Leo and Clara. They had become ghosts, fading from the narrative of our lives completely. One crisp autumn day during our second year, Adrian and I were walking through the campus grounds, a familiar sight, two students lost in discussion, our hands linked. He stopped me under a giant ginkgo tree, its leaves a brilliant canopy of gold. "I received a letter from the administration today," he said, his expression unreadable. My heart sank. Had something happened? Were we in trouble? He saw my fear and smiled. "They've offered me a position. Here. As a junior lecturer starting after graduation. And they've hinted strongly that there may be a research assistant position for a promising student in the literature department." He looked at me. "For you." The world seemed to hold its breath. A future, a real, tangible future here in this world of ideas. It wasn't just a temporary escape. It was a permanent home we had built for ourselves. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Adrian." "I told them we would need to discuss it," he said, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "But I already know my answer. This is our life, Anya. We built it together." We stood there, under that golden tree, two people who had been cast aside by their expected fates. He, the intellectual, exiled to the countryside. I, the village girl, betrayed and discarded. We had found each other in the rubble of our old lives and, piece by piece, book by book, had constructed something new and beautiful and entirely our own. I looked around at the soaring buildings, at the students hurrying to their futures, at the man beside me who saw not my origins but my potential. The journey had been long, from the dusty paths of my village to these hallowed halls. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not in spite of my past but because of it. Every struggle, every heartbreak, every moment of doubt had been a stepping stone leading me here, to this man, to this life, to this version of myself I had once never dared to imagine. The past was a closed book. The future was a blank page waiting for our story to be written. And we were ready. The end.